Hey guys, after my last video about my daily schedule, I got a lot of questions about some of the recovery strategies that I use to help me to perform better, whether it's bodybuilding or powerlifting, because I touched on a few of them during my schedule. They're part of my everyday life. Two in particular that I want to focus on today are my extreme sleep strategy that I mentioned as part of my training leading up to the US Open, which I've continued right as I transition to bodybuilding to earn my pro card. The other one is meditation before training, which actually I started a very long time ago, before my first US Open in 2017, and has probably made more difference. In fact, there's no doubt to me that it has made more difference in my training than any other recovery technique I've used, right? So when I say recovery technique, I'm talking things like sleep, diet, massage, ice bath, whatever, right? Like all of it, meditation's by far the best. I cannot endorse it highly enough. So we'll start with sleep. I'll tell you a little bit more about that strategy and how I can recommend that you can implement it, or at least try to implement it in your own life. And then we're going to talk about meditation, and that one, it's strictly going to be about how I meditate, because first of all, I believe that meditation is an extraordinarily individual practice. Again, like everything else, got to find what works for you. And secondly, because I'm no meditation expert, I'm not a sleep expert either, but I'm not the right person to teach meditation. I will give you some resources that help me to learn that hopefully you can use as well. So let's start with sleep. I mentioned a while back, and I'll link to the video in the description below if you want to look at the first one, but I mentioned that I was using an extreme sleep strategy, that's a tongue twister, guys, to cope with the increased recovery needs when I was training with a higher frequency plan for powerlifting. Well, as you can imagine, now that I'm training for bodybuilding, at least temporarily, by the way, I'm not saying I'm done with powerlifting, trust me. So, as I transition to bodybuilding, I'm increasing my training frequency even more, and that's because for bodybuilding in particular, at my level, I really need a vastly increased training volume, to continue to make progress, and it can be very difficult to get that volume in a single workout, so you have to split the day's work up over more days. Makes sense. Well, obviously that's pretty demanding, and sleeping has been really, really helpful in being able to meet those increased recovery demands. So when I say extreme sleeping, I can sleep anywhere typically between 9 and 11 hours a night, which is a lot more than the standard 7 to 9, when you figure that's probably a 25% increase, and 7 to 9 hours a night is already pretty significant, especially if you're one of the people who can only get by with 4 or 5 or 6. However, it has made a very big difference, at least a very noticeable difference. The most important one is that I feel rested for every training session, even if I beat myself up. And part of that is the split, right? Part of that is the fact that I'm not training my whole body every day. But part of it is also that I just feel much, much fresher by the time my training in the afternoon rolls around. Now, here's the problem. If you have a typical 9 to 5 job, you might not be able to fit that in your schedule, right? That's the big problem. How do you find all that extra time to sleep when there's barely enough time to work and eat and go to the gym as it is, let alone have a social life, right? So I think the number one best way to deal with this is by getting naps. And this is exactly what I did when I was working too. I just didn't sleep quite as much. So, and when I say working, I mean working a 9 to 5, just like everybody else, right? So the first thing I would do, take naps in my car. That was vital. I would just spend my lunch break, go hit a 20-minute nap in the car, super easy, come back, eat lunch from my desk, done. And you feel great, and that way at the time I was training twice a day. I was training in the morning, lifting, and then I'd do some cardio in the afternoon. But the naps were really, really big in getting through that. And then, of course, if you're more of a night owl type person, well, you can take your nap as soon as you get home from work, right? Or if you're on shift work, you can work it into your schedule somehow. But by breaking it up in that way, you don't have to find a huge chunk of time all at once. And in my experience, I feel a little bit more refreshed after a nap than I do even after sleeping for an extended period of time. You don't have quite as much grogginess. The secret with naps is to keep them between 20 and 45 minutes. Any less, you're not really benefiting super much. Any more than that, you are going to be basically have a sleep hangover when you wake up. You're going to have a headache, feel drowsy. It's just not worth. So between 20 and 45 minutes, you can shoot for anywhere between 1 to 3 naps per day, depending on your schedule. And I think that could be really helpful. The other thing I want to mention about naps is that don't get tied to the idea that you have to do this. Please. I've gotten a lot of messages from people who are like, man, I'm just not tired. Like, my body wants to get up after 7 hours. Get up. If your body's telling you you're done sleeping, you're done sleeping. Don't force it. Unless you think you need to force it if there's some reason you can't sleep. And in that case, hopefully you live in a state where marijuana is legal. And if not, I think you're kind of out of luck. Because for me, over-the-counter things like melatonin and GABA and 5-HTP and all that stuff really hasn't helped at all. I'm not saying don't try it, but it can be difficult to find a solution that's not going to leave you, again, feeling drowsy in the morning like Benadryl and Unisom might, and is not going to mess with any other sorts of things. Like, and I have an example in my mind, is like Ambien can make you dependent on it, stuff like that. So those are my 2 tips with regard to sleep. Don't force it. Take naps. Let's move on to meditation, because for me this is an even more interesting topic. Lots and lots of research backing the benefits of meditation. I'm sure you guys don't need that rehashed by now. You've probably been bombarded with it in mainstream media. But I do want to tell you that I personally, just from meditating, I have experienced more focus, more calm at the gym, and also, throughout my daily life. But I've also, even more importantly, experienced the ability to perfect and maintain perfect technique increase like tenfold. You can focus so much better when you just practice focusing through meditation that it becomes much, much easier to apply that in other situations, apply that same focus. And for me, that's the type of focus that I need, that pure empty mind. That is what I need when I'm training for powerlifting, and my technique has to be spot on. For bodybuilding, it's helpful too. It's just a different kind of focus. It's a more steady, maintained focus. There aren't the peaks and valleys you have when you're doing these heavy lifts all the time. But you don't want to be slacking off at the gym either, and it can be really challenging. You're resting your 2 minutes between sets, the mind starts to wander. And if you can stay zeroed in, you're going to find that your workout's much more intense, you're able to maintain that mind-muscle connection better, and overall, you're just going to have a better training experience. Now, again, I really believe that how you choose to meditate is a very individual decision. Personally, I learned how to meditate by just following the Headspace app. That's available on iTunes and Android as far as I know. I found it enormously beneficial. It's not free if you want to go past for like 5 days or whatever. It does cost $10 a month for a subscription. I don't think you should get the subscription forever. Eventually you kind of develop your own practice and then it's not useful anymore. But if you're just getting started, the tools and the guidance it provides can be really, really beneficial. But that's more or less the framework that I follow, is the one that they present in Headspace, which is a very simple one. You just find a place to sit down, close your eyes for a few minutes. Take some deep breaths, right? Real loud deep breaths into the nose, out through the mouth. And that just kind of relaxes your body. You do that a few times, you close your eyes, and then you kind of check in with your senses, is what they call it. And you try and pay attention to the feelings of touch that you have, right? Maybe it's your ass against the seat or your feet on the floor or whatever the case may be. The feeling of your clothes, the wind, doesn't matter. You do the same thing, so the tastes in your mouth, the sounds you can hear. When it comes to sight, I try to visualize my best self. So, I'm just thinking, okay, what do I want to achieve today? What's my purpose in life for this day? And I know that sounds super hippie. I'm not getting caught up there ruminating for like 10 minutes. We're talking like maybe 60 seconds for both of those phases. The third step is to do the same type of inventory of your body and how your body feels. And this should be easy for any lifter. You just kind of scan down your body just like you were doing a fractional relaxation technique, right? So you can start at your head or your toes and you just work your way up your body, and you notice any spaces that are unusually sore or tight or even feel unusually good, right? Maybe there's You still got a nice little residual pump from your training if you're meditating later in the day or something like that. You just try and notice and appreciate all those feelings. By the time you get through all those 3 steps, it shouldn't take long, 3 to 5 minutes. By then you should have a pretty good sense of focus. And from there you just focus on your breath. It doesn't have to be the breath. The breath is just a very convenient tool because it's more or less the same and it's regular, right? So if you have a metronome, you prefer the metronome, you can use that. You can open your eyes and look at an object. That's something that I did for a long time that was very helpful to me. Having my eyes open rather than creating more stimulus for whatever reason made it a little bit easier for me to focus. So all you really have to do is find a feeling, a physical sensation, or a physical, view, object type thing that you can focus your attention on, and you just do that for as long as you like. It sounds extraordinarily simple, and you'll find that when you start to do it, your mind starts to wander really, really fast. You'll get about 5 breaths in, and all of a sudden you're thinking about your training, or you're thinking about what you're going to have to eat for dinner, or something like that. And all that you do is when you notice that, you take a step back, and you go back to focusing on whatever it was you were focusing on before, right? The metronome, your breath, whatever. And you just do that. And you try and add a little bit of time eventually, but you don't force it. Because it's not necessarily something that has to be progressive. It's more something that you do because it's going to help you be progressive in other areas of your life. So again, I'll put some resources to help you guys if you want to try and implement these down in the description below. I do a lot of other stuff. I do compression therapy. I do ice baths, contrast showers. I do gua sha, which I'll talk about in another video because I think that's extraordinarily beneficial, whether for strength or physique athletes. So there's a lot of stuff I do, but those 2 things have by far made the biggest difference. They're free. I think they contribute a lot to training, to overall health, and I strongly recommend you give them a shot.